Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode number 62, and it's called Tell Me About Yourself, Best Answer. So we're going to be getting into that first thing. However, this is an interactive live stream. Usually I don't have anything much of a agenda or monologue. I'm just simply reacting and answering questions. Reacting to what you guys write in the chat. So if you're seeing this right now, you should see a chat box somewhere near my face, my video feed. And if you are a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in there and ask questions. So I encourage you to do that. As always, I want to send a shout out to my YouTube channel members right there. And my super thanks donors, my Patreons, and of course to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. This is about careers and job search, and it's about not just the theory of how job search works, but the gritty reality, what we tend to see, complete with fake jobs, rude recruiters, ghosting, the whole shebang-a-bang. So if you're having to deal with that, get in the chat and let's talk about it. I see that Angelica is here. So hello to Angelica. And is that a balloon or an octopus? I can't really tell. But either way, it's all good. It looks friendly enough, so that's fine. GMJ. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure it's in the spirit of goodwill and best wishes. So same to you, Angelica. ND is here, says good afternoon. Good afternoon, ND. And McKinley says hello. So right on, let's jump right in. The title is Tell Me About Yourself, Best Answer. So let's get into that. Tell Me About Yourself is probably for whatever reason, it's like the most popular job interview question. I don't know why. It's probably the stupidest job interview question, but I mean, like how delightfully vague. It's like you couldn't get a more general question than this. Usually it's used as the icebreaker at the beginning of a job interview, as a lot of you expect, and the area of uncertainty that a lot of people have with it is like, what are they asking for? And I would tend to agree, I've heard a lot of idiot recruiters say, I expect this very specific thing in your answer, or else it's no dice. And it's like, well, if you expect that very specific thing, maybe you should ask a very specific question about it, because it's silly. So how do we go about answering this question? Well, I'll just give you straight up the answer I recommend. Okay. You got to remember three things. The first thing you say when they ask you, tell me about yourself, is you say, well, as you can see from my resume. That's what you got to remember. You got to remember that line. Okay. Now that line is technically optional, but let's not worry about that for right now. You say that line. Well, as you can see from my resume, all together now, kids. Well, as you can see from my resume. And then the second thing you do is you go down your resume and summarize it in 45 seconds. So like that's the level of detail we're talking about. 45 seconds to summarize your resume. So it's just a very quick summary. Okay, you do not want to be on this question for very long. Okay, so you start with your education. I have this degree, or whatever you have, and then you give your experience in chronological order. So you start with your oldest. I started out doing this, worked there for 2 years, and I moved on to here, worked there for 1 year, and now I'm currently here, and this is my role, and I've been there for 3 years. Okay, so like just very quick summary of your resume, and then you end with the line, and that's what brings me here and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. Okay, you can give variations on those lines, but to summarize, you say, someone says, tell me about yourself. You say, certainly. Well, as you can see from my resume, and then you give your education and then your experience in chronological order, starting from the oldest to the latest. And then you end with, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. That's the answer I would recommend. Now, why do I say that? Number one, like I said, you do not want to take up a lot of the interview time on this question. This is simply an icebreaker question. I'm going to reduce the brightness of my camera here, just so it doesn't look like I'm broadcasting from heaven again. Okay, you do not want to spend a lot of time on this question. You don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what you did for other people 10 years ago. It is irrelevant to this job, okay? What is your purpose in a job interview? Your purpose is to explain to them why you're the best candidate for this job. That's what you're there for. Anything that takes away from that is a waste of time, okay? So when they ask you about stupid crap that gets you talking about something you did for somebody else 10 years ago, you want to get off that pretty quick and get back to talking about this job. The reason you end the question, you end your answer the way you do with the line, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity, is because you want to steer the discussion towards this job. You're here to talk about how you're a fit for this job. You don't want to be talking about anything else than that, right? So that's why you end the way you do. Now, the first line, I mentioned it was optional, okay? When you start off by saying, well, as you can see from my resume, that's more of a memory jog for you, okay? So if you don't need to say that. And depending on how you say it, it can backfire. So you don't want to say it in an arrogant way or in like a way that suggests that they should know because they should have read your resume and that you're finding fault with them. That's not how you mean it. You're setting up a summary of your resume. So you say, well, as you can see from my resume, and then then you remember, okay, I remember the rest of the answer. Now I go down my resume. Okay, so you could technically eliminate that line, but it's more of just a memory jog, just so you remember what the answer is, okay? Now, I could go on for quite a bit more about this question, but that's basically the answer I recommend universally. It's just an icebreaker just to get you talking. Make sure that you have a big smile on your face as you're saying this stuff. You don't want to be sullen or look uncomfortable or look upset. You want to feel approachable and come across really reasonably pleasant. That's what I'd say for that. So hopefully that makes sense. Now we're going to open it up to questions. So Mohammed is here. Mohammed says, good afternoon. Why you want to take this job? This was the only question that was asked by the hiring manager. Any comment? Yeah, that's another version of saying, why should we hire you? Or why do you want to work here? It's all the same question. What are your strengths? It's all the same question. They're giving you an open floor to make your pitch why they should hire you and forget about all the other candidates, right? It's actually a very good question to be asked, okay? You don't have to be on the defensive and deflect all kinds of, things. This is actually a very positive question. This is the kind of question you want, right? So the first thing you would probably want to say is, well, I'm glad you asked me that, right? It starts off really well, okay? Then you're going to give the answer that is the answer for several questions. It's the answer to why do you want to work here? It's the answer to what are your strengths? It's the answer to why should we hire you? It's all the same answer. And that is, you're going to make your pitch. You're going to say why you're a fit and why you're better than any other candidate. And it goes like this. In the job description, they told you some of the things that they're looking for. Okay? Usually under a section called requirements, right? They said we're looking for someone who has this and this and this and this, right? Okay? So they're telling you this is what we regard as good. This is what we're looking for. We want someone who has these, right? We're particularly tuned into these things. We regard them as good. Okay? That's what the implications are. So when you get this question, they said, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to take this job? Why should we hire you? What are your strengths? You're going to say, well, first of all, I have this, and it's the first thing that they listed, right? Secondly, I understand you're looking for someone with 5 years experience in this. Well, I have 5 years. I actually have 7 years experience in that. And it's a good thing too, because I've learned a hell of a lot over the course of those 7 years, right? Then the third thing, what was the third thing? They want someone with a certain skill. Well, I have very, very high level skills in this. Right? Now, as you're rattling these things off, they're going like, oh, okay, great. Yes, I know what that is. We're looking for that. That's a really good thing. Right? So you want to essentially go down that list. Now, what can help in a job interview, okay, is you're not just expected, I don't expect you to memorize the entire job description for, an interview you go down to, right? So what's good is to print off a hard copy of the job description, okay? Yes, print it, even in this day and age, it still works. And then if you're like doing a physical interview where you're sitting across the table from these people, right? Have the job description, a hard copy of it, on the table in front of you so you can see it, right? Now, you're not going to read it right off the paper like this, so that you don't look at them. You're going to glance at it, right? Just, so you can see what it says, every once in a while like that, right? But you're still speaking directly to them. What can help is if beforehand you've taken a highlighter. Like, do I have a highlighter here? No, I don't, of course. No, here I do. Here, like a highlighter, like a marker, right? And then you highlight like maybe one word for each of the requirements that they said they were looking for, right? So you can just glance down and instantly see, oh yeah, okay. Forklift experience. Instantly look down, oh, okay. You want someone who has HR experience, like that kind of thing. And those are the things you're going to rattle off. As many of those as you can. You're going to speak to them. Is that the same thing as saying you have them? Not necessarily. If you have them, you say you have them. If you have them partially, you can still speak to them. You could say, well, I do have experience in this. You don't mention that you don't have 5 years in it because that's what they ask for. But you say, I do have experience in this. It's very important. It taught me a lot of things. Right? So you're saying things that they like, that that they're looking for, they regard favorably. Okay, does that make sense? That's basically how you answer that question. McKinley says, what others things to say that's not on your resume? That's what Human Resources asked me last interview. Okay, so what you're saying is they asked you, tell me something that's not on your resume? Is that what you're saying? Okay, here's what I say to that. Okay, now 90% of the time, when you go to a job interview, these people don't know what's on your resume because they might have read it 6 weeks ago or whatever when they asked you to come down to an interview, and even then they might have just skimmed it. But they haven't read it since. And a lot of times when they book job interviews, they book them back to back, right? So there's no time in between to do any kind of revision or, just we're gonna read over this person's resume before they arrive in the room. We're not going to do that, right? So they think they're so clever by asking questions like this. Tell me something that's not on your resume. Now, 90% of the time, you can say something that's on your resume and they won't know any different, okay? So if there's something you really want them to know, like that you meet the main requirement of the job, then just say it. You use exactly the same answer essentially as, tell me about yourself, okay? Like you're basically saying things that are on your resume, okay? Now, the other alternative is to give your ambition, because usually you don't write your ambition down on your resume, okay? And one of the things that recruiters are always looking for, in addition to asking you about your technical skills, okay, what they do is they try and assess your fit for the role. And part of that is to see if you enjoy this actual work, this kind of actual work, right? That's why they ask questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? If they ask you that question, you say, oh, in 5 years, I see myself doing something completely different than this, right? And that's a red flag. It means that, well, this obviously is not your calling. You're not passionate about doing this, right? What they would like, ideally, is a candidate who's actually passionate about doing this work. Sometimes that's a tall order, I know, but that's still what they're looking for to see if they can find that, right? Okay. So you could talk about your ambition. You could say like, well, and talk about like how you're a fit for this type of work in as much words. You say like, well, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I'm passionate about, verifying things. I find that type of work absolutely fascinating. I know it does speak to some types of people, but I love it. I think there's a beauty in doing it. I absolutely like doing that. My mind is tuned to doing that kind of work, And this position as a quality assurance coordinator is perfect because I get to verify that things are done according to the rules. And I love doing that. My ambition is to do that kind of work at a high level, or something like that. I'm sure that's not on your resume, but that would directly speak to how you're a fit for the job without them having to ask you. Okay, so that's another option too. Hopefully that makes sense. Haseen says, I've 2 summer internship experience and 4 years of part-time jobs. I'm graduating this May and having a tough time to get a relevant job. In my junior year, I was getting interviews and offers. Okay, so you're ahead of the game. You're looking for a job before you graduate. That's good. You're being proactive there, Haseen. Okay, there's no real question there, but and I don't even know what you do. But if you want to get into the details, I'll be happy to help you if I can. Internet Vibe says, how to answer, why are you looking to leave your current job? Very simple. Just say, I'm ready to do more. And then shut the hell up. Okay? Don't talk about your current job. Don't talk about why you want to leave your current job. Don't say anything negative about your current job or anyone who works at your current job or the work you do at your current job or anything like that. Okay? Just say, I'm ready to do more. If you have to come up with something and you just don't want to get into it, you could talk about how, you like the job, you like the employer, everything's is going really well there. It's just that there doesn't seem to be many opportunities for advancement at that organization, and you're just ready to do more. It's positive. It doesn't open up a can of worms about, maybe you didn't get along with people, or maybe you're not suited to that work, or maybe you underperformed. You avoid all of that. Just don't get into the details. Okay? You're not at the job interview to talk about your current job. You're here at the interview to talk about this potential job that they want to hire you for. That's what you want to steer the conversation towards, not about other jobs you've had. Okay? Everything that should come out of your mouth should be something that furthers your case to be a good fit for this job. So that means you speak to the requirements and all the soft skills that you would need for this job. Anything else you say is irrelevant, and it actually is detrimental. If you only have 5 minutes of talk time during a job interview to really speak freely and bring up things that you want to talk about, it should all be about this current job and how you have what they're looking for and how you're awesome. So when they try and steer the conversation back away to your current job or anything else, you want to shut it down immediately, only say positive things, and then come right back to talking about this job. Haseen says, the question is, how can I get interviews? I submit applications, but have not had much success in getting interviews. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So Haseen, here's the deal. First of all, there are many different ways to get a job. 20% of all the jobs out there are posted. Those jobs are called the posted job market. The other 80% of jobs that are out there that you could get are not posted. That's called the hidden job market. Okay? Now, let's confine our discussion now just simply to the posted job market. Okay? So these are all the jobs that you can find in an internet job search, on places like, on sites like Indeed and Jobzilla and stuff like that. Okay? Right. Now, of those jobs, you have 80% of all the job candidates competing for those 20% of the jobs. So it's very competitive, okay? A typical job that's posted online gets something like several hundred applications in a very short amount of time, like maybe a couple of days, okay? So it's very competitive. So to get those jobs, you're sort of going in the front door with 700 other people, right? This is the world of ATS, applicant tracking systems, and AI filters, right? Where the AI reads your resume and only forwards it to a human if it passes that initial screen, okay? So therefore, the ratio between the amount of jobs you apply to and the amount of interviews you get is very high. You have to apply to like a couple hundred jobs at least to get one interview on average, okay? Now, because it's so competitive, you can't really submit a sort of standardized resume to every job you apply for. You have to customize the resume when you apply for posted jobs. You have to do this because it's so competitive. If you're trying to get past an ATS filter, it's looking for certain keywords and key phrases in the resume. Okay? It's looking for certain things that are particular to that job, right? Not generic things like people skills. It's looking for something very specific like quality assurance, if it's a quality assurance job, right? So that's why you have to tailor your resume. You have to customize it, okay? Now, in the past, this was very labor intensive. It was very hard to do. It took a lot of work to do this, okay? Today, because of a lot of AI tools there are out there, things like ChatGPT, okay, and others, it's actually quite quick and relatively easy to customize your resume to a job you're applying for. Okay, so what it means is that you can customize your resume to the job and send it out and still be able to apply for at least 50 jobs in a day, like with custom resumes and custom applications. Okay, that's still possible, right? But you need to do that customization. If you're not doing it in this day and age, in the world of AI, you're at a considerable disadvantage, okay? You would have to apply to thousands of jobs to get an interview, okay? I don't know what the numbers are, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. It's pretty bad, okay? Especially if you're going for jobs that are very competitive. They're getting lots of applicants, okay? So you have to customize your resume. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for someone who has, at least in part, the things they told you about in the job description. So in the job description, there'll be a section called requirements where it says, we're looking for someone who has this, right? That's what they want to see essentially reflected in your resume. Do you have to have all of them? No, but you probably have to have the first one or two at least, okay? Usually they rank them according to importance. So the most important requirements that are real deal breakers, if you don't have it, those will be like the first one or two things. The rest, they could be requirements or they could be sort of nice to haves, right? But the more you have of these things, the better. The more you talk about those things in your resume, the better. The higher the likelihood that the ATS filter will pick your resume, and the higher the likelihood a human, a recruiter who looks at it, will want to bring you in for an interview, okay? So this really is an exercise in learning how to customize a resume. It's actually very, very simple on things like ChatGPT. Okay, what you do is you sort of go to ChatGPT. If you haven't already, I'm assuming you haven't done any of this, so I'm just saying for people who've never done this, okay? Go to ChatGPT. It's free to use. Anybody can create an account, doesn't cost you anything, okay? You paste the text of your resume into ChatGPT. You say, here is my resume, and then you paste the text, okay? Then you go grab the job description, okay, for the job you're applying for. You copy that, the text of the job description, and then you say to ChatGPT, you say, here is the job I'm applying for, and then you paste the text of the job description, right? Then you give it some command where you say, listen, I would like you to create a custom version of my resume that is tailored to applying for this particular job. Okay? Have as many link ups as you possibly can and downplay any of my things on my resume that don't have anything to do with this job or anything that was explicitly stated in the job description. Then I want you to write it in this tone. You could that could be enough. You could stop there. Or you could go on. You could say, I'd like you to write it in this style, write it as if it's coming from a quality assurance director or something like that. Use that kind of style. And then it gives you an output. Here's your new resume. You proofread it. You don't just send it off out. You proofread it. Just make sure it sounds like it's coming from a human, right? Paste that into a Word document or a PDF or whatever, and then use it to apply for the job. Okay? And then you're going to do essentially the same thing for the cover letter. Here is my standard cover letter. Here is the job description. Write me a custom cover letter that, makes the best case possible for me and draws as many parallels as possible to the requirements they stated, right? Same thing, right? Okay, so that's what you're going to do. And then it's a question of just lather, rinse, repeat. Just do this over and over again for as many jobs as you can. And that's the name of the game, basically. Okay, so that's what this involves in this day and age. That's the posted job market. Just be aware that there's something called the hidden job market. That's where most of the jobs are. You will not find those online. You access them through networking. Introverts can kick ass at this type of networking. There's a way to go after those. You don't have to be some social butterfly to do it, but those are there too. Okay. But it's best to start off with the posted job market when you're just starting out, because it's simpler. There's less to learn to get those jobs. Okay. So that's about as much as time as I have for, but hopefully that points you in the right direction. Okay, so that's Haseen's question there. Pink Sauce says, how to define a medical tragedy or casualty in a family in an interview without sounding deceptive and a liar. Why would you sound like a liar? I don't understand what you mean by that. How to define a medical tragedy? Well, you could just look that up on Google, right? Are they asking you a question about it? What's the context? Pig Sauce, now you're asking me about the U.S. market. Okay, those aren't particularly pertinent to what I'm doing here. Yard Bank says, hello, I've been out of work for over 10 years helping elderly parents. Okay, that's understandable. Been asked about my gap when applying, how to approach this when applying to talkers or talking to recruiters. I wouldn't talk to recruiters. I would talk to hiring managers. And I would do it on the hidden job market. I would do an outreach, like something called direct outreach. Okay, that's when you contact employers. Now, if you know who to talk to and you know what to say, you can uncover tremendous amounts of opportunities there. Okay, and including things where a work gap will not be a problem, because if the job you're going for, you know how to do, right? And you sit down and talk to a person that would be the boss of you in that role, right? And you know your stuff. They'd be able to see that very quickly. And a work gap is something that they can excuse to give you something, especially something like almost probationary. They'll say well, you're still kind of a question mark because you've been out of work for 10 years, but I can tell you know your stuff. We get along well. I'm impressed with your initiative in reaching out, your enthusiasm about the role. You're obviously very personable, very professional. You got a lot of great qualities here. So we have something that maybe it's a part-time thing, or maybe it's just a sort of low-level thing. If you're interested, let's maybe see if we can start you off in that role. If that's not beneath you, and we'll see how it goes. That kind of thing. And you can get your foot in the door that way. And if it goes well, they can advance you relatively quickly, right? So that's usually how that stuff goes. That's also how people change careers. It's exactly the same process. Okay. So learn about that. Now, I've got a couple of things I can't get into it here, okay, because it would take me a long time. But here's what I have for you, okay? I've got a couple of free videos on my YouTube channel, okay? So especially the last person, Haseen, also would be interested in this. There's a video that's linked in the description box below. It's called Hidden Job Market. Okay, like watch that video. But the more pertinent one is a video I have also linked in the description box below this live stream. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, and that shows you what direct outreach looks like. Okay, so that might be of help to you. There's a lot of different ways to do direct outreach. I mean, you could like do all this kind of stuff in person if you're more of an extrovert. When I present it, I talk to more introvert types because I find that they're the ones that have the most trouble with this. So my approach that I recommend is more geared to introverts. It's using social networking and things like this rather than being in person, and going from there. So check out those two videos. That should at least get you started on the right path, or at least if nothing else, it should give you some ideas. Okay, and best of luck. And that I see Lokesh also is asking that question. Well, that's also an answer for your question. Prime says, how to deal with unrealistic HR requirements. Last time I applied, they still invited me to an interview despite the fact I don't cover most of them. It sounds like they don't even remember the post. Okay, what post? So like what you're saying is that they've got requirements in the job posting, and despite the fact that you don't meet most of them, they still selected you to come in for an interview. And then when you got there, they don't seem to remember the lofty requirements that they said that they required. Is that what you're saying? Do I understand that correctly? Okay, the job post. Okay, so first of all, there could be several reasons for that. I mean, I don't know which one or what's going on with this company, but one thing that they do is because they're receiving a lot of applications, they try and go for gold. They try and like shoot for everything. The idea is that if they say everything that they think is good, like a nice to have, and they explicitly state that in the job posting, you'll be more inclined to volunteer that you have it if you have it, right? If it wasn't an absolute requirement, but they didn't list it at all, then people wouldn't go out of their way to talk all about it, in the application or in the interview, So that's the reasoning why they do this a lot of the time, right? They put on like all these things. The problem is that depending on how they phrase it, it can dissuade people from applying, right? Because if they've said they're all requirements, you might conclude that, well, I don't have half of them, so I shouldn't bother applying. When in reality, you could apply and you could get it because these are all just nice to haves. In a perfect world, the perfect candidate would have these, but we'll settle for someone who's got half of them. You know what I mean? That's a common scenario. There could be other things going on there, but that's kind of probably what I would guess. Right? Now, if you go down there and they don't know what's on the damn job posting, okay? First of all, that's a sign of them being disorganized, or just in the case of a hiring manager, they could just be extremely busy, okay? If there's a hiring manager and a recruiter, the recruiter is the one that's responsible for the job posting. The hiring manager would have been hit up by the recruiter for like, what's the requirements, like weeks ago, and they may not have seen it since. They might have just rattled a few things off the top of their head, like, okay, this, there you go. See if you can find candidates with these, right? And they might not have thought about it since. So now when it's weeks later, the posting has gone out, the applications have been received, they've been filtered, and now people are coming in for interviews. This is a few weeks later. The hiring manager might not remember what they said like weeks ago, that one time they were hit up for this. So I'm a little bit more forgiving of hiring managers. If the recruiter doesn't know, then the recruiter's an idiot. It's just that simple. They're the ones that posted it. They're the ones that are filtering the resumes. If they don't even know what's on the posting, then they're a bunch of morons. And it wouldn't be the first time that we've encountered that, right? So that's what I'd say about that. So don't worry about it, Prime. You know, listen, these people don't seem to be on their A game, put it that way. You know, just do the best you can. Speak to what's on the posting. If they don't seem to care about what was on the posting, oh well, you know, if in the absence of anything else they've given you, not much you can do. You're welcome, Yard Bank. Internet Vibe says, why do managers say they will train you, teach you the tools, but then not hire you? Because it's just talk. Like, look, I'm a detail-oriented person. I know there's a lot of other detail-oriented, introverted type people out there, and you do not know people very well. And one of the things that you learn when you learn about people, especially in business environments, is that they want to have positive interactions with people, right? So there's a big tendency to say a whole bunch of nice things, right? And that's why you've heard the expression, nothing counts unless it's in writing, right? Well, why do people say that? People say it because people tend to shoot their mouths off and say all kinds of things verbally that are either false, or they forget, or they didn't really mean, or they were just being nice. You know? They didn't want to hurt your feelings. They didn't want to get you upset. They didn't want to get you to feel pessimistic. Right? So they'll say all kinds of things. And that's just people. And it's aggravating as hell, but that's how people behave. Right? So if you don't want that, you can go talk to a bunch of lawyers and see what that's like. Because then you have the opposite problem. They don't jabber. They say very, very precise things. And they're so non-committal about everything. It's maddening to talk to them. Because they can't say a single thing without it feeling like, you know, they're going to be called on that, right? So that's the alternative, right? Okay? So when the manager has you in their office and you're interviewing for a job or something, you know, they may say a bunch of nice things. And what they're saying is, presumably in this case, they're saying this is what we would do if we would hire you, right? And to give them the benefit of the doubt, they may not know at the moment they're saying this if they're hiring you or not. So they're wanting to keep their options open, right? It's not necessarily a nefarious thing where they're trying to deceive you or whatever, or they're trying to lie to you. They honestly, at the time that you're talking, they don't know whether they're going to hire you or not. So they're keeping their options open and they're playing it safe, and they're saying, yeah, you know, we would train you, or we will train you, assuming we hire you, because the process isn't over yet, you know? And I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying that, you know, you really don't know what's going on with people. But the counter to this is to realize that unless something is in writing, it doesn't count. It's as if it never happened. If you proceed knowing that, always referring back to that principle, then, you know, things go better for you. Okay? You know, but I agree that it's frustrating and it's annoying. And that's when I was in my 20s and 30s, that was one of my big beefs with extroverts, because extroverts will shoot their mouth off about everything under the sun. They'll talk to you like, oh yeah, we're the greatest of friends and we're going to do all this stuff together. And, you know, that's how they talk to everyone. And then the next day they've forgotten everything they said to you because they weren't serious about any of it. They were just being nice, right? You know, now it's a good sentiment. They want to be close to you. They're open to doing things. Like it's a great thing. That's how it's meant for most people. But I understand you, if you're an introvert and you're a technically minded person and you're like calling them on this and you're expecting them to follow through with it and certainly remember it, and they're not, right? I can definitely understand the frustration. I feel that frustration all the time, but I realize it's part of a larger principle here. Lokesh says, I have an interview this Friday, but this job is based on my previous job experience and had only similar to what? 10 to 20% of previous experience. How do I handle such a situation? Okay, let me see if I understand this. I have an interview this Friday, but this job is based on my previous job experience and had only similar to 10 of previous experience. How do I handle such a situation? Well, it sounds like you have to bone up on that 10 to 20% of experience that you do have, learn all you can about it in a short period of time, at least enough to be able to talk superficially about it, in an interview, and then you'll be prepared for it, right? Or as prepared as you could possibly be, That's what I would say. Hopefully that makes sense. It goes on. Lokesh says, my previous job matches only 10 to 20% of job description. How do I bridge it for the interview? Well, I can't really answer that. I don't even know what you do, and I don't even know what the job is. So it's very hard for me to say exactly what you must do other than generalizations. And the generalization is to just go away and bone up on, study up on that. If you've sort of had an introduction to this thing as part of your job, you haven't really done it in depth, but you've had a sort of introduction to it, right? And now you're interviewing for a job that's doing that stuff full-time in depth, right? Okay? Go and learn all you can about what's involved. Okay? That might involve talking to people. It might involve an internet search. I don't know. It might involve spending some time with ChatGPT. I don't know. But learn all you can about it. Okay? Then, when you go to the interview, you'll have stuff to say. Okay? And you can say, for example, in this role, now I have personally done this and this aspect of it, okay? And I know that, what you would do then is you go deeper into this, you go deeper into that. Those are all skills. I can pick up those skills very simply. I already know the idea. I've been introduced to the idea, right? But I know what's involved in that, and it doesn't seem like a really big challenge. I've done things that are a lot more challenging than that in my previous role, so I'm not really too worried about that. I'll be able to pick that up within 30 days or, less, kind of thing, right? So you can at least speak about it, right? You understand the general idea, okay? That's about all you can do in this situation. If you know someone that's in that role that can maybe give you a tour or give you a more detailed explanation about what they do and why, that would be very useful, if you can do that. But if you can't, you make do with what you have. Prime says, also, they talk to me as if they never saw my resume and don't know me. Yeah, well, welcome to job search. I was just commenting on that earlier in this stream. Most in respect to the question, tell me about yourself. Someone said, well, what do you say when they say, tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume? And my answer to that was just so you know, 90% of the time, recruiters are not familiar with your resume by the time you start a job interview. Okay, they're not. They haven't reread it right before. They might have read it weeks ago when they called you in for an interview, but they haven't read it the day of. So you could probably say things that are on your resume, and 90% of the time, well, take out the word probably. You could say things that are on your resume, and 90% of the time, they won't realize that it's on your resume because they haven't read your resume recently. They don't remember it, right? That's a common thing. The reason, one major reason why that happens is because when they book job interviews, they book them back to back. So there's no time in between to really study up on who the next candidate is before they arrive in the room. They're here, and you haven't had a chance to reread their resume or anything. You're just sort of going off your notes from 6 weeks ago, right? That's how recruiters operate a lot of the time. So that's what leads to situations like the one you're describing. Okay, now just as a reminder, if you want to go deeper with me and my advice on how to get a job, whether it's in the posted job market or the hidden job market, check out that course. Okay, that won't disappoint. There's a link in the description box to it. I've done videos on what it involves, what you get, how it works, so it's as transparent as possible. If you're between jobs and you just kind of lost, you're you don't know what to do. Either you're young or you're relatively inexperienced to job search. Check out that course. It's a good way to sort of get up to speed and learn everything all in one place. If you alternatively are wanting to climb the ladder, check out that course. It's called Write Like a Professional. Not the greatest title. It's more about communication. It's about what to say. It's a writing course, so you learn how to communicate in writing. But it's where I put all the above average advanced communication skills that I had to learn to become an executive and a CEO. So that's where I put all that. So I put it all into one course. You have to tack on several things as you climb the ladder, things like people management skills, things like financial skills as you go up different levels. And you also have to have this, which is the advanced communication skills. So if you're interested in that, I put that into this course, and it's quite popular. There are a lot of people are buying that recently. So check it out. Okay, the third one that's on the screen, that's if you want to learn business. Okay, I'm primarily a business guy from the private sector. So building businesses, making money, that's kind of what my core competency is. So I have an MBA for what that's worth. So I created my version of it for $100, where you're essentially doing self-study. You've got a reading list of textbooks. They're the same textbooks you get in places like Harvard Business School and their MBA program. Just you're reading it on your own time, on your own schedule. And I have videos that guide you through the whole program. So if you're looking for that, it's the best bang for the buck anywhere. Okay, so check that out. Okay, we got more questions here. So I think I got everyone's here up to Hussein. Did I take this one, or is this new? Hussein says, there is this company that I'm interested in working for, but I do not know anyone there. I applied for an entry-level corporate role recently, and I'm graduating soon, so who should I reach out to? Okay, well, good question. You would have to get my course to really know this for sure. There's several people you could reach out to, but this is what I'll say, okay? Here's something that surprises a lot of students. I've taught this in university. I taught the capstone course for a postgraduate business program, management program. And I taught this, and I made all the students do this. Now, here's a principle that a lot of young people seem to have a problem with for some reason. When you tell them you have to reach out to an organization, the obvious question is, what individual should I talk to, right? Now, here's the deal. You've got people on the bottom of companies, the workers, right? And they don't know anything. They can't really help you, right? Then you have the middle managers. Now, they can help you, but they're usually too busy, okay? The problem with them also is that it's usually not part of their job to take queries from outside the company. So if somebody's contacting them that they don't know, who's outside the company, it's usually not their job to respond to those, right? But then you have the executives. Now, the executives, first of all, have a lot more free time than the middle managers, okay? They certainly can help you. They can hire you on the spot if they want to, okay? And it's also their job to take unsolicited queries from the public, because that's how people approach companies. They would send a message to one of the executives, maybe the CEO, and it could be a partner, it could be a supplier, it could be a regulator, it could be a competitor, it could be there's all kinds of people this would be. People like a company that wants to get a tour of your facility and just sort of put out feelers just to see if there's potential for the two companies to work together. Maybe they could partner on some kind of joint venture or some kind of effort. This is what they do. They just say hey, can we talk? And sort of open a dialogue, right? Okay. So executives, it's part of their job to entertain unsolicited queries from the public. Okay. That's what executives do. That's one of the things they do, right? If they said what? Who are you? How do you get this number? No, I don't know what you want. Goodbye. They would be missing out on incredible business opportunities, right? So they're generally receptive to this. It's not like the people in the middle, and it's not like the people at the bottom, okay? So the other thing is that if you want to reach out to someone at a company, they have to be at a higher level than you if you're expecting them to hire you. You're not going to get people at the same level as you that will just hire you, okay? Like, so if you're entry level, if you talk to like the receptionist, you know, they don't have the power to hire you, right? You would have to talk to somebody above the receptionist, right? Now, this is how I start out teaching this material. And I get a lot of students that they react very negatively to this. They're like, oh, who am I to talk to these people up here? You know, and my question is, well, who do you have to be? I mean, I was a former CEO. I'm not that unapproachable, you know? You know what I'm saying? So you have to reach out to somebody who has the power to hire you. That's usually somebody above you, okay? You're not talking to people your own age and, you know, your level. Okay, so get that through your head. That's kind of, you know, just a reality of this stuff. Right? So if you're looking, so the question now is, of the people above you, who do you go to? Now, what I would recommend is, if I didn't know the company and I didn't know what's going on, I'd recommend executives. That's what their job is, and they're usually very, very good at it. They're usually very receptive, and they take a lot of these kind of queries all the time. And they are always looking for people who have the right attitude that want to be employees. Some of them might have more time for those kind of things than others, but they're always looking for that. They're looking for very enthusiastic young people that want to help out. So, you know, and a lot of my students, when they did this, several of them got hired. And one student in particular got hired because the CEO handed their resume to the director of HR and said, look into this person. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than that. You think they're going to take your application seriously now, you know? That's what's going to do it. So you don't want to mess around at the bottom, okay, and try and go up. You want to start at the top and then go down. That's usually how it works, okay? I could go on, but this would be very, very, very long to get into all of this. But hopefully that answers your question. Okay, let's see here. Where did I leave off? Okay, so for example, if you're in a school and you wanted to get an internship, you would talk to the professor who's an advisor on either they're running the internship program. Usually it's an administrator that does it, but if there'll be professors that kind of give input into how the program is run on their end. So you would talk to them. They have some involvement with the internship program. You know, like you're not going to the receptionist. You're going straight to the professor that's in charge of the program, right? That's how you do this. So now everything else you need to know is how you approach them, what you say, what you ask for, okay? So if you're interested in learning that, I have it all in a course, or if you don't want that, I do have some free videos on my channel. There's a playlist that you can access from the homepage of my YouTube channel called, what was it called? Like I did it like 4 years ago. It's called Tapping the Hidden Job Market. So there's about 6 or 7 videos in that series, and that talks a bit about it, okay? I also have a video linked in this description called How Successful People Get Jobs, and that gives you an overview of the simplest form of direct outreach and how you go about doing that. And it's my desktop, so it's not my face you're seeing. You're seeing my desktop as I'm on LinkedIn and, you know, how you do the actual thing. So if that's useful for you, check that out too. Okay, ND says, I'm using custom resume and everything possible. Should I hire a company that helps get a job? You could try it. Usually those cost a ton and they don't produce good results because, you know, usually the recruiters work for the company, right? It's hard to get someone who cares as much as you do about getting you hired, okay? But there's a lot more promising things you can do than doing that. I would look into direct outreach before I hired a headhunter or whoever. Prime says, most of the time I feel like I'm getting automatic rejections as if a person never read my resume. How do I deal with that? Do I include special keywords somewhere? No, you just keep moving, Prime. I'm sorry to say, it's if you're applying in the posted job market, it's just very, very competitive. It's very competitive because you have 80% of the candidates out there applying, all competing for 20% of the jobs that are posted, right? If you go to the hidden job market, you get much less competition. It's maybe between you and one or possibly two other people, and that's it. So if that's a real concern for you, and I would just recommend you bone up on the hidden job market. That's where all the opportunities are. The posted job market, it's a totally different game, and it's based on like high quantity, lots of custom applications going out, and you have like less than a 1% chance of being selected for each one. So you got to do a lot, that's just the name of the game. And you may be right that in some of them, they're not even looking at it. There's fake jobs, there's ghost jobs, there's all kinds of shenanigans going on with that stuff. So that could well be. I don't think it would be for everyone. It would be for, what was it? It was something like 40% of the jobs posted are ghost jobs or somewhere thereabouts. So it certainly won't be everyone. But that's where I'd recommend, like, learn about the hidden job market. That's a tremendous, like, untapped resource for you. And I'd bone up on those skills. Those skills, not only are they useful for getting a job, but they're useful life skills that will help you in your career, like, forevermore. You know what I mean? So I highly recommend it. If you're not, like, just starting out, or I would still recommend it. How do you say that? And Cozy says, what's the best answer when I'm asked to talk about my weaknesses and strengths? Please go back to I just answered that. That was the title of a live stream I did 2 hours ago. Okay, so go look at my YouTube channel. Not this live stream, but the one just before it today. It was called, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Best answer. Okay, so that's right. I also have a video called that. So you could just watch that video. ND says, yeah, headhunter services cost a lot of money, but I'm getting frustrated getting a job, maybe professional coaching. Yeah, okay, well, professional coaching is a lot more promising. Now, look, I don't do professional coaching for job seekers, so I'm not in that game. But many other people are. There's a lot of ex-recruiters who are in that game. And I do a collaboration every 2 weeks with one of them on this YouTube channel. So I have a collaboration on Monday coming up where her and me answer questions like this in a live stream together. And her name is Abby. She's an ex-recruiter. She is a recruiter. And her YouTube channel is called Life Work Balance. Not work-life balance, life-work balance. Okay, so she provides those services, as do many other people. You can start by checking out what she has to offer. What I understand is that a lot of job seekers, they will do just one session. Like, you don't have to sign up for a big, huge thing. You just do one 1 hour session. And basically, it's like a mock interview where you do a pretend interview with her and she gives you some feedback, right? So you could start out with that and see if that leads you anywhere, okay? If you're frustrated, you're not really getting anywhere quickly on your own, and you feel you need some help, you could get my course or you could check her out, or both. But if you're going to try the coaching thing, I'd recommend her just because I work with her. So she's been doing this a long time and she knows what she's talking about. So Life Work Balance. Her name is Abby and she provides coaching services. I have no idea how much it costs, but presumably you can find that out too. I imagine it wouldn't cost a lot for like an hour session. How much could it be? So there you go. Prime says, are directors the same as executives? Once I went in person and gave them, the director of a company, a letter with my resume and projects inside, but I never got a response back from them. It's complicated. I did a video on that years ago. You see, the title director means two different things, okay? First of all, there's a board of directors. Directors are the people that represent the shareholders in running the company. Okay, so in private companies, or sorry, in for-profit companies, the people who run the company are called the directors, right? In government, they're called something else. I can't remember. It's not really my world, but they're called directors. So that's the board of directors, and they represent the shareholders. They have nothing to do with the day-to-day runnings of the company. They are the boss of the CEO. They decide how much the CEO gets paid, and if the CEO should be fired. That's what they do. Okay. Then the term director, confusingly, is also used for a completely different role. A director technically means a manager of managers. Okay. So like you might have a regional director or director of HR, something like that. They're essentially an executive that oversees a business unit or a division of the company. Okay. All director means is manager of managers. Okay. So for example, you have a bunch of department stores or the stores all in different cities, and they all report to a regional director because the store managers report to their regional manager. So you call that person a director. So regional director, right? So depending on what we're talking about here, it could be either the board of directors or it could be a manager of managers, like a mid-level manager somewhere. That's the problem. When I first started, I was a supervisor, and technically my position was called a technical director. So they throw that word around a lot, and it's very confusing. So what I suspect is that if you went down to a company and you encountered a director, that was probably a manager of managers and not the director that sits on the board of directors that represents the shareholders. By the way, I'm sure no one is interested in this, but just in case anyone is, I talk about this stuff on a live stream I do every Friday called Private Equity Rundown. That's where we talk about, higher level business type stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. I'm sure most people here won't be, because we're mainly talking about how to get a job. It's not exactly the same kind of crowd, but I do talk about that stuff. But that's a great question, Prime. I wish I got more questions like that, because that's kind of more my core competency. Yeah, so we've reached the end of the chat. There are 35 people here. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, or anything you'd like me to react to or something, put it in the chat. I'll stay if people want me to talk more. Other than that, as always, check out some of the other stuff I have. I got 2 other YouTube channels. These things here. For job seekers, I got the Company's Expert 2. So if you're interested in getting even more of what I say, you can check that out. Obviously, I've got that course right there that's of prime interest to people here. If you're having problems getting hired, you don't know what to do. You're trying to get hired in the posted job market. You're also trying to get hired in the hidden job market, and you don't really know what to do. It's not going very well. Check out that course. That's where I put all my advice in one place. So a lot of people have benefited from that, and I get great feedback on it. The one thing that's not in that course, I'm going to have to update that course with one bit of information, and that's the resume customization stuff. I'm going to have to add that into it soon, because that's really becoming a thing. Prime says, should we also reach out to talent managers? I don't know what a talent manager is. What is that precisely? I suppose I could look it up. I've heard the term. I mean, I've heard it with regard to, the entertainment industry, right? So I'm just going to open up a window here, and, we can do this together, actually. Let's see here. I'm going to make this bigger if I can. How do I do that? Nope. Let's see here. How do you make something bigger? Here we go. Okay. Professional helps guide the careers of artists, entertainers, athletes, influencers, and other public figures. Yeah, so like entertainment industry. That's a talent manager. I mean, you can check this out. Agents, publicists, like that kind of stuff. Film, music, and social media. So that's kind of my understanding of a talent manager. So it depends on your industry. The answer is it depends on your industry. If you're any of those things, definitely. They're set up for that kind of stuff. So, sure. Lokesh says, how often do you do this? You mean live streams? I do live streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do different types of live streams. So this one, Honest HR Nitrous, I do it at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can see on my YouTube channel, the schedule, and I'm going to pull that up in a second so you can see how this works. Okay, so here. Okay, so this is my YouTube channel, right? Like if you go to the Company's Expert page, right? Okay, it says like upcoming live streams, right? So I've got these things. So the next one of these is April 25th. That's Friday at 1 p.m. where I am. It'll show your correct time depending on what time zone you're in. Okay? But my live streams show up here. I've done a lot of them. So there you go. So that's how you can always find out. And if you're subscribed to me, it should hopefully notify you that I'm live. One would hope. That's the whole point of being subscribed, I think. Whenever I release a video, you would know, and whenever I go live, you would know, hopefully. Prime says, I mean managers of talent acquisition. Okay. Like, is that different than... Okay, let's try this again. You know what? Who is a manager of talent acquisition? Actually, I want to change that to what? You'd think you'd just be able to hit enter and get like an answer, but no. Okay, so here's what this says. A professional responsible for overseeing the recruitment strategy and hiring process of an organization. They ensure the company attracts, hires, and retains the best talents to meet the business needs. Okay, so this is like something other than the talent manager. Okay, I don't like using the word talent. I know they use that in some circles. I think it's a silly term. They're basically talking about employees, right? I think it's another, like one of these modern euphemistic things that they're trying to, abstract people even more by calling them talent. I find that the types of organizations will probably do that and call it that are the ones that treat people the worst, probably. That would be my suspicion. That's totally unfounded. Sure, you can like reach out to them. They seem to be in charge of this kind of stuff. If it isn't a fancy name for a recruiter, then it would be someone of similar ilk, someone that does kind of the same thing. So sure, if that's what they're calling themselves now, yeah, you could reach out to them. I don't see any harm. It would be like contacting a recruiter, it seems, Now, I honestly don't recommend contacting recruiters, as a general thing, because I think it's kind of a waste of time, but I know some people do, and some people do presumably produce good results with it, so I don't think there's any harm in doing it. Lokesh says, what's the best way to customize a resume? Can you provide some resource to customize a resume? Well, I think that the best way to customize a resume that I know of is ChatGPT, right? I was just using it, okay? So, just go to chatgpt.com or whatever it is and sign up for free, just like Google, except that it's far more powerful. And, I described precisely what to do in the last 2 hours. I don't know if it was this live stream, like towards the beginning of this live stream, or it was towards the end of the last live stream I did, but I ran through it, like basically what you would do, how to customize your resume with it. So just to give you the short version, I mean, basically you go to ChatGPT, you paste in the text of your resume, say, this is my resume. Then you go and paste in the text of the job posting. You say, this is the job posting, and you paste the text. Then you tell it, look, I would like you to make a custom version of my resume that's tailored to applying for the posted job that I've just given you. And I would like you to make it so that you present me as the best possible candidate for that role, right? Then what it will do is it'll rewrite your resume. It'll come up with a new version of your resume that's tailored to the things in the job description, the job posting that they said they were looking for. So they will accentuate the things that you have that fit. It may remove things that you have but don't have anything to do with the job whatsoever. So it would kind of dilute your skills. And it would rewrite, your accomplishments and things to pay attention to keywords and the lingo that they're using, key phrases. Okay, so it's some variant of that. And then you would add other commands that refine it a bit, say write it in this style, like the style of whatever it is that you're going for. Like if you're applying for, the example I used earlier was a quality assurance technician or something, you would say, I would like you to write it in the style of the director of quality assurance, something like that. And then you proofread it, and then you paste it into a Word document or a PDF or whatever, and then you submit it, right? So in a nutshell, that's what you do. Okay, so it does the heavy lifting, but you just have to get the commands correct. You have to make sure it does precisely the right thing that you want by getting the instructions correct, right? So you do a bit of this within a couple of days. You have like a sort of mini algorithm, of what it should do, and that's how you can apply to many jobs with a custom application or a custom resume and cover letter, and still be able to do them in bulk, right? Now, there are other tools out there also besides ChatGPT. There's other tools that specifically do resumes. They just do resumes. They don't do like a general kind of thing like ChatGPT. I don't know if they're powered by ChatGPT or Gemini or like one of the others, but there's a lot of them out there. I stick to using ChatGPT. I've tried several others. I prefer it to the others. That's just me. But they're coming out with new tools all the time. So start with ChatGPT, I would recommend, and then maybe try other tools too, and just go from there. These things are continually evolving, and they're evolving very quickly these days too. Prime says, is it a good idea to contact them, recruiter or director, on personal email, phone, or on LinkedIn work phone? Listen, there's definitely a method to it, Prime. I just can't get into it here. There's too many principles. Okay, I will say that email is usually a no-no, simply because it's the easiest thing to ignore. It doesn't get very good results. The other thing is that the problem is that, as with all text, it doesn't convey any tone, right? So that's a big problem with email. So I wouldn't use email for communicating anything longer than a couple of sentences. You know what I mean? I have that all in my course. Check it out. And I also have a video on my channel that's linked in the description box below. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. If you're wanting an answer to this question, watch that video. That's what I'd say. I walk you through the simplest possible way of doing direct outreach. But you got to get my course to get the full meal deal, because it's just too much to get into. I talk for like 10 minutes just answering a job interview question, on these live streams. It's like, if I were to talk about this, I'd be there for hours. I used to teach a course in it. It was an entire course. Okay, where did I leave off here? Reese says, is it frowned upon to reach out to multiple people at once on LinkedIn for the same company? I do this since most don't respond, but sometimes several managers get back to me. It's tough to say. Like, there is no one universal answer. Sometimes depending on the nature of the organization and how closely those people all work together and how much they share of their personal kind of stuff, it can be kind of weird when you reached out to them, but then they see that you've also reached out to their coworker, right? But I would say in most situations, there's no issue. Simply because, as you've already stated, a lot of people don't respond, right? So now, unless you're organized enough that you can like come back and remember which of these people you've reached out to yet and which ones you still have to, like, and do it a staggered kind of thing. In a perfect world, you could do that. If you have that level of organization to be able to do that, then sure. But usually with these things, you're doing such a high volume of stuff that I don't consider that a good use of your time. You know, in the beginning, it's like job applications. You just want to get a lot of them out there. You want to do the best you can with each one, but then you want to get a lot of them out there, right? You know, because a lot of people just don't have any opportunities, or they're just not open to it. Others, they're just not on LinkedIn. So, you know, they have a LinkedIn account, but they're just not checking on it in a timely manner. You know what I mean? And other people just, you know, for whatever reason, they're just not into it. So, I mean, you know, it's like job interviews. You know, you pepper the place with these requests, and your response rate is going to be a certain percentage, right? Now, what I did years ago when I, you know, created my consulting company, I was interviewing purely with just CEOs of companies. And I wasn't just doing direct outreach where I sent them a message. I sent them a message to get an informational interview. And what I did was I sent out a connection request to the CEO that I didn't know. And it was something like 20 or 30% response rate for those. And then of those people, so like I know they're on LinkedIn, I know they're at least somewhat receptive to interacting with me. Of those people, I then sent a request saying I'd like, you know, an informational interview. And I got something like I think it was a 20% response to that. So, you know, you can figure out the ratio. So it's like 20% times 30%. So whatever that is, it's like 6% overall. So if you initially connect with 100 people, you get 6 interviews, 6 informational interviews. Now you can send out 100 of these like template messages easily in a day. You could send out more than 100 in a day, certainly. And each 100 you send out, you get like 6 informational interviews or whatever it is. That's plenty. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot. You know, it takes you a while to do 6 interviews with people. That will be like 6 separate days or something. So, you know what I mean? That was what I did just for CEOs, right? You got to put a lot of things in place. You got to know what to say, and you got to know who to talk to, and you got to know how to phrase it. That's a lot to teach people when they are starting from zero. That's why I put it in a course. Okay, you know, it's not something you can explain in 5 minutes and just have everything perfectly make sense. Okay, I think this is new. Prime says, what does it mean when they don't respond on LinkedIn like in the previous comment? Also, one time I messaged privately on personal phone, but I still didn't get a response. Oh no, you did that once, Prime? I'm sorry, I don't mean to mock you. No, listen, like that's a thing. You see, anyone who's done sales, I'm not a salesperson, okay, but I've had to manage salespeople among other things. And the thing is, sales is a numbers game, right? Think of someone who goes door to door, right? They knock on someone's door. Hello, would you like to? And then they get the door slammed in their face, right? Right? So for every 100 doors you knock on, okay, you know, 30% are not home. Another 30%, you know, I don't know, say no outright. No, I'm not interested. Slam. You know, maybe another 10% say, you know, they have a conversation with you, but ultimately they decide, no, I'm sorry, I'll think about it, you know. And then whatever is left, like 10 or 20% say yes, and they buy whatever it is you're selling, right? It's a numbers game. Now, if every time you make a sale, you get, say, $50 or whatever, right? Okay. So you know that if you want to make X amount of money, then you just multiply it by the ratio. And that's how many doors you got to knock on, right? So knowing that is good, right? So if you know that, okay, on average, if I send out X many messages, I get like, say, 2 interviews. If I send out, say, 200 messages, I get 2 interviews or whatever it is, right? If I want 10 interviews, then I need to send out 1,000 messages, and I could do 200 a day, So that means in like a week or whatever, I could have all my interviews that I want, right? That's how this stuff works. That's how sales works, right? It's all about ratios, and it's a numbers game. It depends on probabilities, right? So what you're engaged in here, if you're trying to find a job, you're essentially, this is a sales game. You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to put yourself forward as, like, I am the solution to your problem. So welcome to hell. You're in the world of sales. And it works exactly the same way. Like, just in the posted job market, when you're applying for posted jobs, it's a numbers game. You might send out 1,000 applications and get like 2 interviews or whatever it is, right? It's a matter of ratios. Or it could be a lot more promising than that. You send out like 1,000, you get like 10 interviews, whatever, right? So it's the same idea, like, so all this business about like, oh, I once contacted one person and they didn't respond. What happened? Well, it could be any number of things. First of all, maybe they're too busy. Secondly, maybe they didn't feel like it. Thirdly, maybe it's not technically their job, so they decided not to do it, right? They figured if it's really important, it'll come back to me, and it didn't, right? You know what? A lot of people are busy. That's why they don't respond. If you contact someone on LinkedIn and they don't respond, it could be any number of reasons. It really doesn't matter. The result is the same. Most people won't respond. Some people will. And it's the reason you're doing it is because some people will. It's like the door-to-door salesperson saying, I knocked on one door and the person came out, but they said no. Now, why did they say no? What am I doing wrong? Is it something I said? Is it the way I'm dressed? Maybe I should go and like totally revamp my sales pitch. Maybe I should go and change all my clothes and get a new uniform. It's like, no, just stop, knock on 100 doors and then see what kind of response you get. If you get 0 out of 100, then maybe there might be a cause for concern, But after one door, having a sort of identity crisis and like wanting to give up, that's not doing it right, right? You will never know what's up with that person. It can be any number of benign things. Maybe they were on vacation. I mean, who knows? Okay, Prime, feels like a dice roll the way you are explaining it. Excellent. Now you get it. Isn't that what job search is? You see, you have a certain thing to offer, right? Some people, when they take a look at you, they go, no, absolutely not. I'm not hiring that person. They clearly suck. They're not what I'm looking for, right? Just like when you go to a job interview and you meet a hiring manager and you think to yourself, oh, hell no, I'm not working for that colossal prick. This person is rude. Look at them. They're sloppy. They're unshaven. They got their feet up on the desk. This sucks. I'm not working for this person. This is probably not going to end well. This looks like a terrible company. I'm going to focus on getting hired somewhere else, right? So that happens some of the time. Another thing that happens some of the time is that somebody meets you and they go, yes, you are awesome. We want to hire you now. In fact, you know what? If you stick around, we'll have an offer typed up and I can give it to you right here, right now, and you can take it home. Okay? And hopefully you'll be able to get it back to us tomorrow because we want you. Right? It's random chance. It's a very serendipitous process, right? And you'll encounter everything in between. Right? That's just the way it goes. Okay? That's just like sales. Now, if you don't believe me, you don't have to take my word for anything. Go and talk to a salesperson. If ever you talk to someone who does sales for a living, talk to them about how it works. Like, ask this question. Say, if you reach out to someone and they say no, what do? Do you worry? Do you stop? Do you rethink your whole strategy? What does it mean if you try something and you get a no? What does that mean? Right? Ask them that question and see what they say. Okay? You could go right now onto LinkedIn. You could do a search. You do a people search, okay, where the result is individuals, right? It's not like jobs or anything, but a people search. You confine it to your hometown, okay? And then you search for the word salesperson or sales or a certain type of sales, industrial sales, whatever. Okay, and then all these people will pop up. And these are people who, either they're now working as a salesperson or they were previously salespeople, right? Okay, the word salesperson shows up in their profile or whatever it is. And you can contact them and you can say, hey, I'm interested in getting the perspective of someone who works in sales. And I'm just wondering if I could give you a quick call and ask you a couple of questions about the nature of sales and what it's like to work in sales. Is that okay? Just send like a template message to all these people, right? Now, most of them won't respond. Some of them may respond with a no, and some of them will respond with a yes. They'll say, sure, here's my number. I'm available here, if you want to call then, right? And call them up and say, hey, I got a question. Like, you've been a salesperson, right? When you do this and you get this reaction or this result, what does that mean? Do you change your strategy, or at what point do you change your strategy? What would you do as a second step if you got that reaction? Or something like that, and just get their opinion on it. You'll get exactly the same. You get a very similar thing than what I'm saying to you here. Okay, so there you go. I'm losing my voice. So I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon. I'll answer Lokesh's question here. It says, I have 8 years of professional experience. Do I make a 2-page or a 1-page resume? It's up to you. It depends what people have asked for. I think that for 8 years, you could certainly do a 2-page thing. I would do like a 1.5 pages. That's kind of standard. I mean, my resume, the last resume I had like 10 years ago was like a 1.5 pages. You know what I mean? 2 pages is quite a lot, just for like one person to get to grips with them. It's not necessary to write that much. If you have probably a lot more things than you can fit on 2 pages, you need to edit. You need to, let's get the highlights. Okay. I'm not a big fan of 1-page resumes, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. What matters is the expectations of the people that you're applying to, right? So if you're going to reach out to a recruiter, somebody mentioned reaching out to a recruiter like earlier. If you're going to reach out to a recruiter, this would be a good question. Say, I understand your company is hiring for this job and you're the recruiter for it. Great. I got a question. Do you guys prefer 1-page or 2-page resumes? If you got a 1-page resume, would that be a red flag, or what's more typical for you? I have 8 years experience. I could make a 1-page or I can make a 2-page. It's kind of like, even money, what I should do. What do you recommend? And see what they say. That's the person whose opinion matters, right? The person who's going to receive it. And also, for what it's worth, you're opening a dialogue with the recruiter. That may have some value too. They now know who you are. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I guess I will answer Prime's thing here. Prime, you're asking a lot of like different types of questions here. Are certification and/or degrees useful in any way, as old people say? Because recently I've heard employers avoid new graduates. Well, you're going on all kinds of like anecdotal stuff here. Are degrees useful? Yes, they are. Are all degrees useful? No. There are some Mickey Mouse degrees out there, especially recently. Universities and colleges and other educational institutions have started pumping out stupid crap that isn't really a thing, but they are doing it for the novelty. They'll sell anything to anyone. So you get people with all these silly qualifications that aren't in demand, okay? It's not about old people. It's about people that are smart. It's not how old you are that matters. listen, here's what you do. You got a degree that you're wondering, is this useful? Right? You're wondering, if I have this degree, what jobs does this qualify me for? That's what you're wondering? Here's what you do. Go to LinkedIn. Okay, you may need the premium version of LinkedIn to do this. So if you don't have it, see if you can do the 1 month of premium LinkedIn for free trial, right? Get it, cancel it before the end of the month. You don't have to pay anything. Okay, so you can do this. So go to LinkedIn and do a people search. And in the search box, type the name of the degree. So if you're wondering if a bachelor's of industrial communication is a useful degree that opens doors for you, okay? Type that into the search box and do a people search. What it will come up with is it will come up with the people who have that degree. It's written on their profile, okay? Now, look at what jobs these people are in, okay? If they're all working at the local donut shop, that tells you something. If they're all directors of large multinational companies, that tells you something else, right? So if you type that in and there are no results, that means nobody really has this thing, not in your hometown, right? Okay, so that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can do the reverse version of that. You can do the opposite. Think of a job you want. What's your ambition? Oh, you want to be the director of finance for a large company. Okay. Well, what do we need to get that job? Okay. So go to LinkedIn, do the people search again. Okay. But this time, instead of typing in the degree, type in the job title, director of corporate finance, or, whatever. Okay. There may be a way to refine it to only show you people at big companies. I don't know. But anyway, type that job title in, okay? Then the search results of the people search are going to be individuals who either are in that role now or used to be in that role, okay? Now, that's the role you want. That's what your ambition is. Look what they have. What education do they have? What experience do they have? Do they have any certifications? How did they climb the ladder on a path to that job? Did they work in a certain area for a certain number of years first? Do they all have that pattern when you look at all these people? Did they all spend 10 years working as a lawyer to get that role? Or did they all spend 5 years working as a bookkeeper or an accountant or a corporate controller? What is the career track for it? Okay. That should give you some ideas of what to do. Then if you want to go an extra step, now that you've seen all these people that have this thing, okay, reach out to them. You can send them a message. You can say, hey, could I give you a call, or could I meet with you? Could you spare me half an hour? I'd very much like to ask you about your career, or a career in corporate finance, like how it works and what your thoughts are, what your expert opinion is. And like usual, most people will either not respond or say no, but some people say yes. So you might get 3 people that are in that role that, they said, here's my phone number, give me a call. So you call them and you ask them and listen to what they say about it. You ask them, how did you do this? What do you think about it? How would one who is starting out now, who wants to be in your role, how would they go about doing it? Right? And listen to their advice. And if all 3 of them say the same thing, that kind of pretty much seals the deal. It's a pretty good bet that that's what you would have to do to be in that role, if that's your ambition. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that you have the power to do, right? It's all at your fingertips if you have access to the internet. Okay, you can find, specifics if you're wondering about a certain degree or certification, if it's right for you. Forget about what people say about it, just out in the world. You never know what their conflict of interest might be. Go and talk to find out if people have it. And if they do, go and talk to them about it and say, did this open doors for you or not so much? See what roles they're in. Okay. Right. I have to get rolling now, but thank you. There are 29 people here. You guys are awesome. Check out that course. Okay. If you're wondering how to get a job, you kind of are lost, it's intimidating. If you have a job, you're kind of wanting to get promoted, further your career, climb the ladder, check out that. Okay? Those will really help you. I will be back on Friday to do more live streams. So if you have any more questions, I'm in North America. I'm in Central Time in North America. So I'll be here like in the afternoon. I think it's 1 p.m. It said Central Time, North America. If you check my YouTube page, it'll say what time in your time zone that is. Okay? I wish you all the best of luck. Remember, you're all awesome. Remember, you're all highly employable. Okay? And you're going to find something. It's just a question of when. Okay? That's right now, there's an employer looking for you. They want to hire someone exactly like you. And they're looking over here, but you're looking over here. You're not connected. It's about connecting with the right people. Okay, best of luck, everyone. I will see you on Friday. Take care of yourselves.